Welcome to End of Life University podcast, where we share real talk about life and death. I'm your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, and thanks for joining me here today for episode number 319. In just a moment, I'll be sharing with you an interview I did with Gabrielle Elise Jimenez, who is a hospice nurse, an end-of-life doula, and a conscious dying educator. She's also the author of 3 very sweet books about her experiences as a hospice nurse and an end-of-life doula. And I think you would really enjoy reading those, and we'll talk about them during our interview. But before we get to the interview, just a quick shout out and a thank you to all of my supporters on my page at Patreon, patreon.com/EOLU. So patreon.com/EOLU. This is a page where you can go and make a small monthly contribution, which goes toward keeping the podcast on the air, paying for all of the expenses that I incur every month in producing and editing this podcast. So I want to thank all of my supporters who've been making regular contributions. It means everything to me. I really appreciate the financial support, but also the emotional and spiritual support of knowing that there are people out there listening who appreciate what I'm offering. It makes all the difference to me. One reason being because when you're a podcaster, you often sit at home alone and record things, and sometimes you're interviewing someone either over the telephone or over Zoom, but they're not in the same room. And so you make these recordings and put them out in the world and have no idea who's listening or if people are enjoying it or what they're getting from it. So whenever someone signs up as a new supporter on Patreon, I hear that as a thank you and also a validation for the time and effort that I put into doing these interviews. So once again, I just want to say thank you to everyone and let you know how very, very much it means to me and how grateful I am to you. So we'll move on now to my interview with Gabby. And as always, I will come back after the interview to share a few takeaways. So stay tuned when the interview ends. Here we go. Today, I'm so excited to welcome my guest, Gabrielle Elise Jimenez. Gabby is a hospice nurse, an end-of-life doula, and a conscious dying educator. She has written 3 books, Soft Landing, The Hospice Heart, and most recently, At the Bedside, all with the intention of helping others provide end-of-life care. Gabby believes that anyone can provide care to someone who is dying. You don't have to have a license, but you do need to have the tools. And that is what she hands out in her books, her blog, and on her hospice Facebook page. And you can connect with Gabby and learn more about her work at her website, which is thehospiceheart.net. So Gabby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm just so thrilled. I feel like a 5-year-old. I'm so excited.
Well, I've been wanting to interview you for a while because I follow you on social media and I see all of your posts. And so I'm excited that it's finally time. We're finally connecting and able to have this conversation together. And I always start by asking people kind of their origin story. And I wanted to ask you how you first got interested in becoming a hospice nurse. And you said you've told that story a lot of times. So I understand that you can just give us the brief version of how you found your way into hospice nursing. I'm curious because I don't always see young nurses making that choice or nurses along their path. So just curious.
Well, I will be happy to share. I think I'll start by saying that I was in my 40s. I was not doing this type of work. It was not in any part of my makeup whatsoever. And I had a friend who was dying, and his wife asked if I could come and help sit with him so she could work, which I did. I actually slept in the twin bed next to his twin bed, and I was there when he'd wake up and when he ate and showered and all the things that kept his life going. But it was the hospice team that would come in and out that I watched in awe of their amazing ability to tap into what he needed in such a kind and compassionate way. I was just so amazed by that. And I thought to myself after he passed that I needed to do this somehow. So I went to school to become an CNA, a caregiver, and a home health aide. I moved on to home health aide, and I was a companion for the elderly for about a year. And as I was doing it, I had two in particular, a husband and wife. And as I was doing this, I realized as I watched their decline that I wanted to be able to provide better care. And I knew that as they declined, they would eventually die, which of course would have broken my heart. But I wanted to know that I was going to provide them with good care. So I decided to go back to school to be a nurse, which was incredibly difficult at that age. And also, and my first book, Soft Landing, is really written about that experience because I wanted people to not let obstacles or age get in their way. So it wasn't easy. I did not graduate high school at the time that I should have. And so when I was accepted into this nursing program and I had passed all my entrance stuff, they then said, okay, well, we'll need your diploma, of which I did not have. And so school was going to start in about a month, I think. And so I went back to the place where I got my CNA and HHA, and they all voluntarily helped me study for the GED. So in 1 week, I graduated high school and started college. And my goal was to be a nurse, to specifically be a hospice nurse, which you probably know this. They do not teach hospice or very much end of life care in nursing school. So I got a license, but not necessarily to provide end of life care. And so that's kind of where my journey started.
I love your story, Gabby, because it's so inspiring and such a good reminder to everyone that it's never too late. You can be awakened at any time in your life to a new path. And, if you're willing to put forth the effort, you can get there. You can start a whole new journey, no matter what age you are.
Absolutely. And that's what Soft Landing's about. It's about the journey. And there were a lot of bumps along the way. Part of my bumps were bad choices I had made in my earlier years, and they come back to haunt you, I can assure you. And I stumbled through them, but I crossed that stage with such pride, and I was pinned, and I became a nurse. And it was one of the most amazing moments of my whole life.
Wow. That's really an inspiring story, Gabby. I love hearing that. And it sounds like you picked the right path. It sounds like you are really doing the work that's right for you at this time in your life.
I really am. And I have learned so many lessons and so much about myself. When you work in this type of field, you become very humbled, and I think that's a very good way to evolve as a human. Early on, I was a nurse. I assumed I had a cape, right? They call hospice nurses angels. I mean, there's all these things, and you just think you're like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. But at the end of the day, what you realize is that, first of all, you do not do this work alone. You do it with a team, and that team is a very intricate part of how you provide end of life care. So I had to learn what that meant, and I had to understand that I am not a solo act. And then I also had to know that, well, thank you for calling us angels. That's really not the way we see ourselves. And I didn't want to live under that sort of title. And I really wanted to learn and grow every day, which is the reminder that we do not know everything. And I know a lot. I've had maybe 7 years, which is not much, of this experience. And I've seen several hundred people take their last breath, but I do not know it all. And I am a constant, ever filling sponge of whatever I can get around this experience that I have. And because I want to share it with everyone, right? I want everyone to know that this work is amazing and beautiful and inspire them, but it takes work, and you learn and you grow and you evolve every day.
And I love that you mentioned that this work is humbling work. And that's something I wanted to say about your writing, reading your blogs and your books, is that you approach everything that you share and story you tell with such vulnerability and authenticity, and you're so willing to show us your own journey and what you're learning and what you've experienced along the way, and that it's really profoundly helpful to people who read what you write.
Oh, that means a lot to me. Thank you. I've always been someone who wears my heart on my sleeve. I don't think that I would ever make it in a poker tournament. You know exactly how I feel all of the time. But what I have found, and especially on the Hospice Heart Facebook page, that community is so incredible. And it's got 73,000 people that have followed that page. And what I have found is that at the end of the day, whatever license we have, whatever our education, however thick our wallet might be, we are human beings and we are fragile, and we experience fear, we experience love, we experience failure and weakness and excitement and joy, and all of those things we all feel. And so when I write what I'm feeling, even on my most vulnerable days, I realize that there is someone out there who gets it, and that I am reaching someone that might otherwise not feel supported and perhaps even feels alone. And so I make it a conscious choice to be completely authentically honest, even to the detriment of sharing my weakness.
Which is so beautiful. And the fact that you have 73,000 followers on that page tells me there's a huge need for it, and you're tapping into it, and you're connecting so deeply with people. And that's what we need. We need people like you willing to share your truth and just be who you are and put it out there for others. And so I'm a big admirer of that and a fan of what you're doing. I wanted to ask you about becoming an end-of-life doula, because you also did that. You also got doula training. And so I just wanted to know what led you to that, and how has the doula training changed the way that you work?
Oh, that's a great question. I originally decided to become an end-of-life doula because of the limits and restrictions and boundaries that are on you as a hospice nurse. You know, as a hospice nurse, I go in and I see my patients, and I'm with my families, and I'm supporting them to kind of guide them through this journey. And then when someone dies at that end, when their last breath is taken, I give a hug to the family, I extend my sincere condolences, and I leave. And I honestly, I have broken some of those rules, in which case I check in with them a day or two later, because when you sit at the bedside with someone who is dying and someone who is going to say goodbye, you connect. And I don't know how to just close a door and walk away, and I struggle with that. And as an end of life doula, it allows me the luxury of time. I can also start taking on patients way before 2 weeks. Like a lot of times, even though you get this hospice diagnosis when you have 6 months left to live, we tend to get patients in the last month. I want to get them at 6 months. I want to meet them and their families. I want to find out how they want to be cared for when they die. I want to choreograph a death that brings them comfort and support and hopefully peace for the person who is dying, but also take the hand of the person who's saying goodbye and help them navigate the steps before, during, and after. And as a doula, I have that ability to do that. Unfortunately, at least in my company, doulas are not recognized. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just simply not going to be a part of the team. And so I'm troubled by that, because I think they should be. So what I've done is I've taken the training that I've gotten, which is deep and spiritual and amazing, and I incorporate that into the work that I do. And I am a huge fan of hospice volunteers. So I am often asked to speak to the hospice volunteers, both through the company I work for, and other companies are hiring me now to speak to their groups. And I take what I have learned, because in many ways, I think the hospice volunteers are already doulas. And I just hand them over the tools, because what I have found is, as a nurse especially, I go into these homes and I say, okay, this, here's the medication. I'm a big fan of education, so I'll tell them everything I think they need, and then I leave. But when I leave, I take my tools with me. And so I realize that if we hand over the tools to the family, then they can do this work and they can feel peace in their heart knowing that they provided care. So as a doula, now at this time, I do have some private patients that I see, but I incorporate my training in my work. I incorporate my training in, especially with volunteers and caregivers, to hand over their tools, and with the families. And if given a little extra time with the patients, I will help to choreograph their last months, weeks, and days.
That's really wonderful, because you've found a way to overcome some of what I find the most tragic drawbacks in the hospice system. It's as if hospice itself, which is such a wonderful system of care, and the concept of hospice care is so beautiful and amazing, and yet the regulations and the requirements to run the business of hospice are so overwhelming sometimes that they interfere with the staff's ability to really be fully present and to really experience all of what they could be offering to patients. And so I love this idea of becoming a death doula also allowed you to have more tools to work with and different ways of interacting with the family, but also with the other staff members on the hospice team.
Absolutely. And I think that we would benefit. I don't know if you read, I wrote a blog about it, about incorporating the doula in the hospice team. And if not necessarily as a team member, simply, but perhaps let's say we bring a doula in to do the training, because the end of life training that we get as a doula is an addition to what we do as hospice team members. And there is something really beautiful about it. And I think that we could have our volunteers trained as doulas and allow to use them a little bit more in the care for our families, to be able to sit a little bit more often and provide that care. And so I do believe there is a place for them. I do believe that humans in general would benefit from this training, but especially anyone who works in end-of-life care. I think it would be a big contribution to the work they do if they all did the doula training.
I'm a huge advocate for that. And I'm a consultant for a hospice back in Colorado, and I see them struggling and suffering, and the staff feels overworked, and the nurses are burning out because their caseloads are too high and they don't have enough time to spend with families that they need. And I've been telling them over and over, you need death doulas. You need to train all of your volunteers to be death doulas, and they'll support the nurses, and they'll become they could be part of the team. But so far, I have not been able to get any traction with that idea. I don't know what the resistance is, or the inability to see the value of death doulas, but I'm hopeful I can break through that.
Oh, girl, you are preaching to the choir. I am just so darn passionate about this, and I don't understand the resistance. I don't understand the wall. Is it because it's not a hospice benefit, so it wouldn't be paid for by hospice? Does it mean that the companies would have to pay for out of pocket? I'm really not. Is it a money thing? I know that there's a lot of things that might contribute to this, but at the end of the day, we are caring for people who are dying. They will not get a do-over. This is the one and only experience they are ever going to have at this. And I think if we are going to take them on under our care, it is our responsibility to provide the very best care. And if we are short-staffed, if our nurses are overworked, if our whole team is overworked, which is global, then if there is a way to bring someone else in, or a type of care in that could perhaps fill the gaps, or simply enhance what we're doing, wouldn't everyone benefit? And the patient would have a little more care, perhaps a little bit more personal attention. And those who are saying goodbye would feel that their takeaway would be such that they would think, gosh, my husband, my wife, my sister, my brother, they were well cared for. And I get to take that in my heart with me and walk through the rest of my life as I navigate my grief, knowing that everyone came together and provided really good care.
You're so right about that. And I'm hopeful if we keep speaking up that we can get this message through. At least if they would just try it. Just try training one person as a death doula and see what happens, because I think it would be an amazing experience for them, and it would change their attitudes totally.
I agree, and I am not giving up.
Same here. We'll team up and keep working on this. Well, I know you write that anyone can take care of someone who's dying if they have the tools. So I wanted you to just tell us a little bit about what tools do you feel are the most important when you're training someone who might want to care for a loved one at home. What tools do you feel they most need to have?
Well, that's a good question. So obviously there's medication involved, right? And as a clinician, that is something that I am able to do. But almost everyone else that sits at the bedside, whether it is a caregiver, home health aide of some type, or a volunteer, or the family members or friends, they don't have that license. So let's putting that aside, the medication part, that's our role. When you're sitting at the bedside, I kind of see the dying experience as enhanced senses, right? So the senses that we experience, hearing, sight, touch, feel, all of that stuff is heightened. So how can we provide comfort in honoring those things? Well, one is being very aware of the sound of your fingers as they're tapping on a phone when someone is lying in a bed. What does that sound like? Or when you drag a chair across a room, what must that sound like to them? Or a light is in their eyes, or the fan is blowing on them, or they're staring at a blank wall when there's 75 photos of people they love to the left of them. What if we move them so they're in sight? I encourage the people at the bedside to tap into those senses. What do they hear? Do they want Britney Spears, or do they want the ocean on the background? Really to be aware of those things and to be fully present, which means remembering that this is not about you. This is about that person lying in that bed having a dying experience that could be either hindered or heightened by you. So if I teach you to be a little bit more aware of how you talk, touch, and create an environment around them, imagine the difference it might make. So most of the things that I hand over, my tools, are the things that you don't need a license for, which is tactile and verbal stimuli, things to look at. Like I don't do a lot of vital signs because I don't want to rely on that. So I look at their eyes and their skin, and I look at the way their body is moved. And do they really want the blanket so tight around their toes that they can't move it? No. So loosen that up a little bit. What can you do when you're sitting at the bedside that doesn't take a license? I'm going to hand those tools over to you. I want to give them to you so you can do that work.
This is so great. And it draws me right back to the days when I took care of my mom at the very end of her life. It was only for like the last week of her life that she was bedbound and needed total care. But that's where, even though I'm trained to as an MD to work with hospice patients at the end of life, I didn't have a lot of the skills and tools of just that, everyday care of being with someone hands-on. And so when you're mentioning the covers around their toes, it was like the day before my mom died, she kept kicking her blankets off. And my mom, her whole adult life, has someone who's always been too cold. She's always wearing long underwear underwear and sweaters and jackets. And so I would rush over to her, immediately when I'd see her kick the covers off and cover her right back up again and put extra blankets on. And we repeated this like multiple times over and over. She kicked the covers off. I would cover her up again. And she finally opened her eyes and looked at me and she said, "I'm hot." And I thought, oh my gosh, like that didn't even occur to me. Didn't occur to me that she might be too hot. And, I was trying to do the right thing, but I didn't have quite the right amount of sensitivity to what she was actually feeling in the moment.
Well, and most people just wouldn't know that. And I think in general, we project what we feel onto other people. So if we're cold, we think someone else is cold. If we're hot, we think they're hot. But what I have just found over the years of being with patients who are dying, some actually really do like all those blankets on them. But when you're dying, your skin is so much more sensitive, and weight can sometimes be really uncomfortable. So some people would rather have a sheet on them or nothing at all than this pile of blankets, whether it's snowing outside or 90 degrees. It's just about really, truly honoring someone who's lying there and figuring out what they want. I see people who are agitated, right? Their arms and legs are moving around, and many people just immediately want to hurry up and give them some lorazepam. Well, I'm not a big fan of medication. So unless I like to first assess, what can I do first before giving a lot of medication? Is it necessary? Yes. Is it beneficial? Absolutely. But is there something else we can do? Well, when people are dying, people in general have dry mouth. Well, imagine laying in a bed with a dry mouth and no one knows because you can't tell them. And they, of course, don't think to check because why would we? And you're so agitated by this dry mouth. But imagine I come over and I just put a little drop of water on your tongue. I tell you first, though, because this is your body and we shouldn't do things to someone without at least giving them a heads up. So I say, George, I'm going to put a little bit of water on your tongue, okay? And I'll put a couple drops on his tongue and you just watch his body relax. So is it possible that the dying experience isn't what made him agitated and it was simply a dry tongue? What if we addressed things like that first? What if we just honored their body and what it must be going through first before we suddenly assume it's something else? And I think that's important. And those are the things that I teach to anyone who I'm training, especially people who are at the bedside and in my classes. I think those are things, the tips and tools that I think people could relieve symptoms with.
That's brilliant. And it's really about being able to tune in and observe and pay attention to the little clues the patient is giving you. And by just being present, as you said before, and observing and sitting with the patient, they will often show you or tell you what you need to know.
Oh, absolutely. Their eyes tell me everything. And I could be off sometimes, but most of the time their eyes will tell me if they're hours or minutes away from taking that last breath. The eyes are such an indication to me, and the way their hands and fingers curl, things like that. I look at that. The only time I will ever take a vital sign is if the family wants, because sometimes they really need that. And I get that and I respect that. Or if I really want to know if their heart is just because it's racing so hard. And I get the feeling that if their heart is racing that hard, that they're working hard. So I want to kind of resolve that. But if we look at them, that human body lying there, look at their eyes, look at their skin, look at their fingers, their toes. And, people always think, oh, well, their nail beds aren't blue, so that must mean they're not close. Well, that's just some people. Not everybody has nail beds that turn blue. And some people, their oxygen doesn't go down right away. And some people, their heart rates don't go up or down. Some people do have apnea. Some people don't. And the death rattle, and whoever came up with that name really needs some serious therapy, because that's just mean. If you explain to people what that rattle is and what it really means, you could relieve fear of all of those people sitting at the bedside. I mean, there's just things that you can do with education and assessing visually.
And you make such a good point that it isn't just the book learning that matters, something you read about in a book. It's the time that you've spent being with patients and observing them and connecting with them that tells you, for one thing, as you said, not all patients are alike and not every dying process is alike, and that oftentimes you'll be surprised and you'll see something new that you haven't witnessed before.
Always. And you have to be mindful of that. I think that it's really important to know that we do not know everything. And no matter how many last breaths you've seen, there's going to be something that's going to startle you. I mean, I have seen some really beautiful deaths. I have seen peaceful. I've seen comfort. I've seen all of that, but I've also seen fear, and I've seen deaths that were difficult. And you have to be prepared for it all, which means you have to help the people who are sitting at the bedside be prepared for it all. Death is not always beautiful. And there are ways to relieve some of those symptoms, but you can't sugarcoat it, and if there is a wife that is sitting next to that bedside in the kindest, most compassionate way, you have to prepare her for what could happen in such a way that she's not startled.
So true. And that takes a lot of courage and a lot of presence, and also a certain amount of confidence from what you've experienced in the past, that you can create a safe container for whatever happens on that deathbed.
Yes. And I think that it is really important for all of us, the hospice team, to provide as much education as we can, because the more knowledge you hand to somebody who is sitting at the bedside, the better choices they will make for the person lying there. But they can't do it without our help. And we are the ones that do have the experience. And I mean, what are we going to become, like tool hoarders? What is it? It doesn't do us any good to stick them in our bag and never share them with anyone. Like we're some sort of magical hospice person that comes to the bedside and says, "Oh, I will honor you with my tools." No, it should never, ever be that way. I want to give them to anyone who wants them, because that means that they are willing to improve the way that they care for someone who is dying. And that is my goal. That should be all of our goal, right? How many people can we hand our tools over so that the work we do is spread even further out and more people can die with a kinder, compassionate care?
Absolutely. We need to have a ripple effect, as you said, because there aren't enough hospice workers and death doulas in the world to care for everyone. We need to spread the knowledge and spread the tools to so many more people.
Yes.
And Gabby, in your book At the Bedside, I read you wrote about your Facebook page, The Hospice Heart, that we just talked about, has 73,000 members. And you wrote that the majority of the posts, or the most common posts on that page, deal with grief. And so I think that's a really good subject for us to talk about as well, because it is something that in our work with people at the end of life, we deal with grief for the family. Sometimes it's the patient's grief, and sometimes it's our own grief. So I wanted to ask you to just talk a little bit about that, about what you've learned about grief.
So yeah, grief's kind of become my jam. I find that as a hospice nurse, while I do really find comfort at being at the bedside of someone who is dying, and honoring that space, I am finding myself very drawn to the ones who are saying goodbye, and how I can help relieve them of some anticipatory grief, how I can comfort them in a way that allows them to be heard without me needing to fix them, and to know that grief is not one color, and we all experience it differently. And when someone dies, you are usually bombarded by your neighbors, your friends, the family. Everyone's coming over with casseroles and, oh my gosh, we're all here for you. But after about a week or so, and sometimes longer, that starts to dwindle. And as it dwindles, people back off, they stop checking in, and this person who has lost someone they love, their grief doesn't fade because you have. Their grief doesn't lessen with time. In fact, every single year for the rest of their lives, on every anniversary, on every birthday, on every holiday, all the things that they shared together from the time that they met and fell in love, whether it's father, mother, sister, brother, that love, that doesn't go away because someone died. Grief does not go away, and grief does not follow a time clock. It doesn't, skip holidays. No, it's every year. So what I have found is that grief is unique, it is individual, and it deserves to be honored in the best way possible. And so when I am with someone who is going through that, I give them some simple things that I say frequently. One is which you may wake up tomorrow and you feel pretty good. And you're kind of liking that. And you go through the day and you're thinking, gosh, this weight isn't as heavy. But then a song plays, or you smell something and you're triggered, and then you just sit there and you bawl hysterically. And you wonder, gosh, I'm never going to get over this. Well, the truth is you will never get over this. No one gets over it. And so my advice to people who are grieving is to honor their feelings, to work through the myriad of different ways that grief affects us physically and emotionally, to constantly trust others and reach out to them and let them know, you're not fine. You are struggling and you need to find your tribe. And on the flip side of that is I tell people all the time, please don't stop checking in with your loved ones. Please don't forget about them, and never tell them to get over it, or hasn't it been long enough now? Those words are hurtful. And what you're telling them is to stop caring for someone they love. So my advice to the griever is to grieve, to walk through it in whatever way works for you, as long as it is safe and not harmful to you. And if you need help, you ask for it, and you find a way to get the support you need, and you do what you need to do to take the steps to heal. And for those who know someone who is grieving, hear them, sit with them, listen with no intention of fixing, but to let them know they've been heard, and to check in with them always, on every anniversary, at every holiday. And if they are still setting a place setting for coffee every morning for their loved one who has passed, take the chair next to it and respect that, because people deserve to have their grief honored.
That's so true. And that's such a good way to put that. I also think about, though, as care providers in hospice working with patients at the end of life, that we sometimes experience our own grief. But for me, oftentimes it felt somewhat disenfranchised. It felt like I can't really participate in this mourning process that the family is, because I'm not part of the family and I don't even know the patient that well. But there were times when I definitely was aware that I felt my own grief after the death of certain patients. And I was curious to know if you've experienced that also.
Oh, yes. I lost both my parents almost 30 years ago, maybe a little longer. And I was with both of them when they died, and I did not have a close relationship with them. And so when they died, it wasn't that I didn't feel anything, but I didn't feel grief. I didn't feel loss. I'll be honest in saying part of me was thinking, oh, okay, well, there was such little connection between me and them that I didn't get that. Well, over the years and through some therapy, I have worked through my issues with that. And actually, that's a constant work in progress. So I'm still working on that. But what I have found is when I am with a family, if it's a big family, right, and they're all close and they all get along well, there's a part of me that's envious. And so when I see how close they are, and when I see them holding the hand of someone who is dying, and I realize how blessed they all are, there is this part of me that aches when I see them go through this death. Or when I see a daughter say goodbye to her parent, I am on one hand, a little envious that I didn't have that, but I am constantly reliving either something I didn't have or wished I had, or had but wished I had done it differently. So for me, many times the grief that I experience is a reaction to a death that I've had in my life and how I did or didn't handle it. And then sometimes when I'm sitting with a family and they, or just one person, a husband or wife or a daughter, when I'm sitting with them and they share their stories about someone that they love who's lying in that bed and who is dying, even though I'm only given this little glimpse, their love is so contagious that I can't help but feel it. So when that person dies, when they take that last breath, and I look over at the person who's about to say goodbye or who had to say goodbye, and I see that tear as it just sort of slowly falls down the face, or sometimes becomes uncontrollable sobs, I ache for them because they have just said goodbye to someone they love. So I do grieve. I do cry, and I don't hold it back. I don't throw myself on the bed and make a scene, but there are times when I have one tear and there are times when I sob, and I feel their loss and I feel their pain just in different ways sometimes.
That's really beautiful, and that you're able to acknowledge the pain. And then you've also, I mean, you've gotten therapy and you've gotten help when you've needed it for pain, which was part of, what you've advised for other people also. But one concern that I have for those of us in healthcare professions, at least in my training, grief was not part of my training in any way, learning about grief or even understanding that I myself might carry a burden of grief after the deaths of patients. And I feel especially concerned about that right now because of COVID, and that so many healthcare providers in hospitals are dealing with far more death than they may have in the past. And I'm concerned that they're possibly overwhelmed with unresolved grief, and there's no time or no place or no mechanism for dealing with all that grief. And I'm just curious to know if what you've been witnessing this past year and a half.
Working, I mean, obviously it's on a different level. I mean, I can't speak for the people in the hospitals and what they've experienced. I am worried about them because what they saw and still continue to see is heart-wrenching. And so, and topping it off, that they're there, in their full PPE 24/7, and they are seeing these families and or not seeing families, right? Being the family for this person who's dying because they can't have anyone in there. I think their grief, I think that has to be addressed a little differently, because I think it's on a different level, a higher level than what I've experienced. But I will tell you that working through COVID was the hardest thing I think I have ever gone through in my whole life. And I have said this before, but I will say it again. There was a time during the height of COVID where I wondered if I was capable of continuing doing this work, because sitting at the bedside with someone with layers of rubber gloves, not being able to touch them, holding phones for loved ones to say goodbye from afar while I'm sitting next to them, knowing that I had to make the call to tell someone else that their loved one has passed, and breaking their hearts even further, or walking down hallways and seeing chairs outside doors, knowing that every chair represents a patient or a person behind that door who has COVID, knowing that in one facility alone, there was 37 patients with COVID, 37 doors that were closed off to the world, 37 people isolated in a room, and that's just one facility. And so every day I cried, and I went home and I went to bed and I climbed under those covers so fast, hopes that no one would find me, because I just needed a moment alone. It was heartbreaking and it is painful. And my fellow nurses, we tried to support each other, but the weight was so heavy, and it was hard. And then I tried discovering new ways to care. Like, I still held the hands even though I had a glove, and I still hugged, although carefully. And I tried to bring families close together with FaceTime and whatever tools that I could that could help them feel that they were there, reminding them to say the things, right? Like, I know you're not here physically, but say the things. She can hear you, so that people could at least say goodbye. And I did whatever I could. But during that time, I did not practice self care. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the energy. I put myself and my self care last. And that was not a good thing. And I suffered for it. I would be honest in saying that there was a lot of depression. My anxiety, which I already had, and my panic attacks, which I had already had, increased. And I felt broken. And I knew at the time I was questioning whether or not I could continue to do this work or not, that I needed to do something about it. So I reached out. I reached out to people I work with. I did it with the intention of asking how they were, to let them know that they were not alone, but also saying how I'm feeling. I then, on that Facebook page that you had mentioned, I started reaching out and saying how I feel, and realizing that I wasn't alone. And that's really when that page came to fruition, is because there were so many people feeling that grief. And so we walked through it together. And then I started practicing my own rituals, which I still do now, where I honor my feelings. And every day when I got home, I took a moment and I honored the lives that I saw that day, the deaths that I saw that day, the people who had to leave behind and walk and navigate their future of grief. I honored them, and I talked about it and I worked through it. And I now do that every single day. And I am practicing self-care every single day. But it took some work to do.
Wow. That's beautiful. I love the ritual that you do. And I think that tending to those, I guess I want to say, like, the spiritual pain, in a way, the soul pain of having to deal with such difficult circumstances, that may be the most important type of self-care, like more important than taking a hot bath or drinking a cup of tea or going for a walk, all of things which are good. But by tending to your emotions and your spirit, in a sense, by doing that ritual, it seems like that's the most crucial thing that you could do to care for yourself.
Absolutely. I think that emotional, spiritual pain is in many ways more powerful and debilitating than physical pain, because it physical pain, you've got a pain in your leg, or I mean, I have pain in my back and my neck all the time, and that is just always there. But that emotional pain, that spiritual pain, the weight of what I personally experienced during the height of COVID was heavy. I felt like I was walking in mud with boots that didn't fit, and each step was heavy, and I felt dread when I would stand at my car and load up with this PPE. I would walk into the building, like, and all I kept thinking was, they must think I'm doing this because of them. Like, how must that feel? They must think that we all look at them like they are contagious, and what a horrible feeling for them. And then I would leave each building or each home, and I would go to my routine at my car, where I would lay down my chuck and I would stand over it and I would take off all my PPE, and then I would peel things off, and I would feel dirty. I felt unsafe. I felt worried. And all of that I would pile up on my chuck, and then I would seal it up in a bag, and I would, make sure that it didn't touch anything. And then I would look in the mirror at the dents in my face, and I would, and the mask is so tight, and I already have claustrophobia, so I couldn't breathe, and I take it off, and I feel like I was just suffocating for that period of time. And that weight is heavy. And if you see 5 patients in a day and you go through that 5 different times, you're just piling it all on top of each other. So by the time you do get home at the end of the day, and then of course you have to finish your charting, you just sort of take it off, and you hang it on a hook and you get up the next morning and you put it back on because you already know it's going to be there. So you might as well just wear it all the time. So it's heavy, it is painful, and it has to be dealt with.
And it's so good, Gabby, that you're able to talk about it so authentically. I mean, really talk about the pain and really describe what it is, because I think that's the most healing thing that you can do for yourself, for one thing, but also for others who are listening, who are going to say, I have felt exactly like that. I know exactly what you're talking about.
They need to know they're not alone. And we have to be, I think, in our world, of course, but in this work, I think we have to be a community, and we need to support one another. We need to lift each other up. We need to hold one another. We need to put down personal opinions, judgment, all of that stuff, and just be human beings providing incredibly beautiful work and rally around each other and be this village that we are, because we are stronger together.
So true. So very true. Wow, Gabby, I knew this was going to be a good conversation, but this is just really touching my heart and really profound that we're talking about this. And so, I'm hoping that it touches other hearts of listeners out there, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who've been suffering the last couple of years and who needed to hear this and to hear your disclosure and your honesty and authenticity. It's hard to move on from that. But I wanted to ask you one question I had in mind that I was curious to see what you would say. So it's shifting a little bit, but 3 things that you wish everyone knew about death and dying.
Well, I think that I will add to that life, right? So the most important thing to know about death and dying is we're all going to die. That is a part of our reality. And death is final. There is no going back. So life should be lived. I think I see a lot of people that wait for the bedside and then they pour out all this emotions and these feelings. If we lived a life with the idea that we were dying tomorrow and all we could count on is today, imagine the difference it would make in our own life, also how we treat and support others, but also that bedside would be left to simply say goodbye or thank you or I'll miss you and I love you. I think death is final. And we need to honor life more so that when death happens, we are not bombarded with regret. So I think that would be my first thing about death. I think people need to know that, I guess I want to go back to being death is inevitable, and it is not easy, and it is not always pretty. And there are things that happen that can be scary, and that it's okay to talk about it. I think that would be my third thing. It is okay to talk about death. Most of my life as a hospice nurse, people do not ask me how my day is because they are afraid I'm going to tell them. And they are afraid that I'm going to talk about someone who died, which usually follows a lesson, or my experience with life and love and culture and faith and all of these things that I get to witness as a person who walks the path of someone who is dying. I am blessed. So I like to talk about it. But, so I think people don't invite me over anymore to like dinner parties because I make everyone cry. And I get that. But if we talked about death more often, if we were more open with what we feel about it, our fears, our anxiety, if we were more open with how we want to be cared for and we shared that with our loved ones, if we created a playlist for our loved ones to play when we die, imagine the things that they wouldn't have to try to figure out on their own if we sat around and talked about death. If we had a really good conversation with the people we love about it, and we said, look, this is what I want, this is who I want there, this is who I don't want there, this is the music I want played, and when you have the celebration of life, this is what I want you to eat. If you talked about it, you would remove some fear and uncertainty, because death is uncertain. It is unpredictable. You cannot say whether you have a diagnosis with a term of time or not. You cannot say how someone is going to die, but you can, by talking about it, say how they're cared for. So what do I know? What are my three things? Death is inevitable. You need to talk about it, and it's not always pretty, but people can be cared for well with your help.
That's wonderful. And I think that's the entire reason I started this podcast, was to talk about death and dying, and knowing how many people out there are afraid and how many people won't invite us to their social functions. At least by having conversations together, I'm hoping, and putting it out there for people to listen to, that we're modeling for them that it's okay to talk about death. Like, we're totally comfortable and nothing bad's happening to us. And we've been here for almost an hour talking about death. And so I want to thank you for helping me model that to other people.
Absolutely. I think that, we're just all going to die, and you can't say, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, because we can't be certain of tomorrow. So with the idea of death being inevitable, and of course we all have to question our own mortality, is that, shouldn't that just inspire you to live a better life, to be a kinder human, to live more fully and fiercely, and to just play a little bit, and have fun, and stop being so mean or angry. This is all we got. This is it. We get this one chance, at least in this mindset. This is it. So we're going to die. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we want to be cared for, so we can put that aside and everybody knows, and let's just have some fun.
Exactly. And honestly, if you knew how limited your days were, would you really choose to use your time being hateful toward other people? I don't think most people would.
No. But most people that I see at the bedside are made very well aware of how fragile and precious time is, and how limited it can suddenly be, because you don't think that way. We don't live our life with that mindset. So because of that, when it happens, we are in complete and utter shock, and we just don't know what to do with ourselves. Well, that would change if we were more open with it, because we're going to die. That's just a given. So yeah, I think we need to talk about it more, and be more open about it, and be kinder to people. I don't ever want to, when I die, I don't want anyone to ever think, gosh, she wasn't very nice. She lived a really miserable life. She was unkind. Though I want to live a life where people say, I want to have what she had for breakfast, because she's awesome, and she's fun, and she tells the truth, and she lives her best life, the very best that she can, and she's got flaws, and that's okay.
And I'm with you on that. I agree with you. I feel motivated by those same thoughts about just wanting to spend the rest of my life being the best person I can be, and therefore overcoming some of my shadow issues and healing myself so that I can do a little bit better each day.
Absolutely. I think that our world would be, I was thinking the other day about 9/11, of course, right? And I remember when 9/11 first happened, that particular day, and following that, the way our community, our world came together, the flags on bicycles, the support, people were a little more tender towards one another. And that faded, which disappointed me. But then COVID hit, right? And I watched as communities kind of helped one another, and there was these signs in the windows, but that too faded, and then people became angry. Or politics, we aren't even going to go there, but politics, the anger that politics is breeding, the anger that COVID and masks and vaccines is breeding, the meanness in people is so it's just not very productive. And I just wish that people would just stop being so mean to each other. It is not helping anything.
You're so right about that. So right. I just wonder if people had a mirror in front of them and could see and hear how they behave towards others, would they want to change their tune a little bit and change their story? I know, or would they, if they saw how others might remember them when they're gone, would that change how they behave right now?
Well, you made a very good point. So I mentioned this earlier before we started the podcast. I live a life now where how I want my grandchildren to see me. So I have these two great, wonderful little granddaughters, right? I love them, and they've got this innocence and excitement and joy about life, and they're not affected by politics and religion and disconnect on the world stuff. They are simply just happy to be alive, and they look at me and they love me. And I always think, how do I want to look in their eyes? So my advice to people, much like the mirror, is if you had a 5-year-old granddaughter, are you the person that you want her to see? Is that how you want to be remembered? Is that what you want to pass on to her? Is that what you want her to carry on in her class and with her classmates and as she grows older? I mean, if we changed our behavior to reflect how we want little kids to see us, and in a way that would motivate them to become better human beings, is this the message you want to send? No. No, it can't possibly be. You can't possibly be proud of yourself, and if you're treating people poorly. So think about what children see. Is this the message we want to send? Is this how we want them to one day run our world? No. So let's be kind.
That's such a wise message, Gabby. And you do have so much wisdom to share about death and dying, and also about life itself. And I know that you're teaching some courses, and I wanted to ask you about those because I think you're an excellent teacher. So I'm really happy that you started teaching. So just tell us what courses you have available.
Thank you. I love teaching. It's my favorite thing. I think if I didn't love end of life care so much, like actually being at the bedside, I would love to just do this. So I have two main classes. Once a month, I teach a ritual and ceremony class. And the first portion of it is I share some of the rituals that I do at the end of life. They're for people who are dying and people who are grieving, and things that families can do to connect with their loved one who is dying. So I've created quite a few. I make them up. I mean, it's not like it's anything fancy. You can make them up too, but I hand them over to the people in the group. And then at the end, I will do two different rituals with the group to give them the tools to make their own, in hopes that they carry forward, which is one is maybe sending messages to people that you've said goodbye to. Some people, especially during COVID, did not get to say goodbye to the people that died. And so I help them to do sort of a personal ritual where they can do that. And also do a ritual about letting go of that which no longer serves you, and finding a way to stop carrying the weight of things that are not in your control. And so it's a very heavy, emotional, beautiful group. And I do it once a month. The other group is a 7-week course, 1 day a week, and I offer two, one on Wednesday and one on Saturday, based on the time zones, because I have people from all over the world. And it's a class that kind of goes into what we were talking about during this conversation, which is being aware of your time frame. You have 3 months left to live. What does that mean? How do you want to be cared for? What do you want people to know? What do you want to say? What things do you want to do before you go? And so it's twofold. On one hand, you're being made aware of the things you want, and you're going to go and share them with the people you love. And on the other hand, you're also maybe inspired to leave a fuller life because of that. And then you are also able to have some of the tools, which I hand over in each class, so that you too can provide kinder, more compassionate end of life care. And the idea with these classes is I kind of use my hospice stuff and my doula stuff. So it's a really great teaser course for anyone who wants to consider becoming a doula. It's also great for anyone who provides bedside care, because I do hand over all my tools. And each class is very deep and very personal. And it's kind of heavy, but it's a beautiful heavy. And then I've started doing, this is new. I have people from all over the world, actually, companies who are hiring me for a 2-hour course for their hospice volunteers, which I love. And it's also just handing over my tools and saying, you got this. You guys already have the heart. I'm just going to give you some tools to use. And so all the classes are awesome. And the next ones are, registration just opened for the new batch. And you can just go to my website and everything's there.
And I'll remind listeners, the website is thehospiceheart.net. That's right.
Correct.
Yes, with
Yes.
the at the beginning, thehospiceheart.net. And then where can listeners find your books?
So the website actually has everything. It has the links to the books. It has information about the classes. And then, I mean, they're all on Amazon. I self-published. I'm not fancy. And they're all there. And I would read them in order. Although if you're doing end-of-life care and you want some tips and tools, At the Bedside is great for that. But they do go in order, because Soft Landing starts with how I got started in this. The Hospice Heart sort of goes back to my childhood and things that I realized, maybe I was meant to do this all along. And then At the Bedside is all about how to help you provide end-of-life care. What I want to do is inspire people to do this work and do it well, and hopefully help to improve the way people are cared for when they die.
That's beautiful. And Gabby, you are an inspiration and you are a treasure. It's been so much fun talking with you, and I'm really grateful that we had this time together.
Well, I am just honored to be here with you. When I got your email, I was kind of giggled a little inside, because I just think you're lovely, and I do love your podcast. I especially love the people that you speak with, and how you allow everyone to be so unique with their different ways of doing this work. And so it's helpful for me. And it, like we were talking about earlier about how we're all constantly learning and growing. I think things like this, these podcast conversations, because we are all so different, we can't possibly all do one thing for someone. So collaboratively, all of our conversations are going to make a difference for someone else. And that's huge. So this is awesome. I love that I got to have this time with you.
Yes, me too. And I hope, like, the other good thing about the podcast is the opportunity to network. So I hope people listening will get in touch with you and take your courses and hire you as a consultant, Gabby, and we'll just keep the ripple effect going.
I love it. I love it a lot.
All right. Well, take care.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Gabby. It was really fun to talk with her about the work that she's doing, knowing she's right out there in the field right now, working every day to help people. I was really touched by her vulnerability and honesty about getting overwhelmed during this COVID season and forgetting to do self-care for a while. And I think that is something all of us need to take a look at, that we've all probably fallen short in our self-care. And so it was a great reminder to all of us that we really have to look after ourselves in order to get through this challenging time. But also, I was so touched to hear about her Facebook group, which has grown to 73,000 people from around the world, most of whom are talking about grief. And I think this is such a powerful reminder to us that there's a huge need out there everywhere for help with grief. And so any of us who are willing to step up and be available to reach out to people, just creating groups like this where people can come together and converse, I think, and write their comments and their stories about their grief. I think that's a really powerful way to help people get through this time. So her experience, I think, validates that the need is huge, and all hands on deck are needed right now for any of us who can step up and offer something in our community, online in social media, that might help people who are experiencing grief right now and have nowhere to go for support and even just information about grief. So I encourage everyone listening out there, if you have the capacity or the inspiration at all to make some sort of offering where you live or again online that helps people deal with grief, please do it. Please take inspiration from Gabby's experience and how things just exploded for her overnight because the need is so great. So we can use all of you, whatever you have to offer. So if you enjoy this content, please be sure to share it with other people who might benefit from listening too. And you can also help out by subscribing to the podcast wherever you happen to be listening, whatever platform you're on, whether it's iTunes, Google, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and several other platforms. If you subscribe and then leave a rating and review, it's very helpful in terms of getting the podcast seen by people who are searching for this kind of content. So thank you for all of you who have left reviews in the past. I really appreciate it. So until we come together next week, remember, we're here for love. That's what this is all about. So face your fear, be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your precious life. Bye-bye.